Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Jew podcast, where we dive deep into Torah and Judaism to uncover its hidden beauty. Come join us as we take a closer look and breathe new life into traditional Jewish ideas. And now, here's your host, Rabbi Moshe Siegel.
Hello, and welcome to episode 63. Today I want to discuss the mitzvah of making Kiddush on Friday night. The process of Kiddush is relatively simple. You take a goblet, people often use a silver one. It should hold at least 3.3 fluid ounces. You fill it with wine or grape juice and then recite the text of Kiddush, which can be found in any prayer book or bencher. When you finish it, you should drink a majority of the cup. Many people also give everyone at the table a little taste of that wine, and that really is ideal. However, from a purely halachic perspective, it's not really necessary. All that's necessary is that you use a cup at least 3.3 ounces, and you drink a majority of that cup. Now, although it sounds like a pretty simple process, there's really a lot of depth behind this mitzvah. For starters, many people don't realize this, but sanctifying the seventh day of the week over a cup of wine, in other words, making Kiddush on Friday night, is actually a biblical obligation and is counted as one of the 613 commandments in the Torah. So let's dive a little deeper, look at the source of Kiddush, understand the text a little better, and finally understand the deeper significance of Kiddush as well. So the source of Kiddush in the Torah is a verse in Exodus, chapter 20, verse 8. And it's actually the fourth of the 10 commandments. The verse says, Zohar es yom ha-Shabbos l'kadisho. Remember the day of Shabbos to sanctify it. And the Talmud in the tractate of Pesachim asks, how do you remember Shabbos? What does that mean? And it answers, by taking a cup of wine and making Kiddush over it when the holiness of Shabbos enters. So that's the source of Kiddush in the Torah. And the text of the Kiddush is pretty simple as well. It's 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph is taken from Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, and describes how after completing creation in 6 days, God rested on the 7th day and sanctified it. We then make the blessing of Borei Peri Hagafen, which is the blessing for wine or grape juice. And we then finish with a blessing sanctifying Shabbos, which speaks about the elevated and unique status of Shabbos and of the Jewish nation. All these texts can be found in any bencher or prayer book. You can also find them in the source sheet for this episode as well. So that's the basics of the Friday night Kiddush. Now let's try to uncover some of the depth behind it as well. The Talmud writes an unbelievable statement about making the Friday night Kiddush. This can be found in Tractate Shabbos, page 119b. De'amar Rav Hamnuna, Rabbi Hamnuna says, Kol hamispalel be'erev Shabbos ve'omer vayichulu. Anyone who prays on Friday and says vayichulu, which is the first paragraph of Kiddush that we mentioned above, Ma'ale alav hakosov ki'ilu nasa shutaf l'kadosh baruch hu b'maisa bereshis. The Torah considers him as if he became a partner with God in the creation of the world. Amazing. If you say these 3 verses on Friday night, these verses which testify that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th, somehow you become a partner with God in creation. Now, what does this Talmud mean? How can you become a partner in a work that's already completed? And if the Talmud just wants to emphasize the importance of Kiddush, so discuss the great reward you get for saying it or something along those lines. But how does making Kiddush on Friday night turn us into God's partners? So on a basic level, I think the idea is that God created the world with a purpose. And part of that purpose is to elevate the physical world with spirituality. When we say that God created the world in 6 days and then rested on the 7th, in essence what we really mean is that God created the physical world in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested within it, meaning he connected himself to the physical creation. He infused that created physical world with his spirituality. And that's exactly what we are doing when we also stop working on Friday and make Kiddush. We're connecting our physical world, our physical experience, to the spiritually elevated day of Shabbos. So when we say the words of Kiddush, describing God stopping to work and infusing the world with spirituality, we're not just saying these words, but we're actually living them as well. Through elevating the physical, we're partnering with God in this mission of creation. And I think this really is the basic understanding of this idea. But the Kabbalists take this concept even deeper. The Zohar, the primary Kabbalistic work, writes an unbelievable thing. The Zohar writes that when God created the world, He only created it with enough energy to last for 6 days. Then God created the day of Shabbos, which when kept, has the power to re-energize the world for an additional 6 days. And this cycle repeats itself. If nobody would keep Shabbos, says the Zohar, the world would revert back to tohu vavohu, to the astonishing emptiness that it was initially. But through keeping the Shabbos, it's the CPR of the world. It keeps the world alive for an additional 6 days until we can once again keep the Shabbos again to repeat that cycle. There's a great Kabbalist by the name of Reb Chaim ben Attar, best known for his deep commentary on the Torah titled the Orach Chaim. He uses this idea from the Zohar to explain the passage in the Talmud that through making Kiddush, we become partners with God. He says that when we sanctify Shabbos on its arrival, and we keep this holiness for the next 25 hours, we're literally allowing the world to exist for an additional 6 days. We're partners in the most literal sense. In our direct merit, we're keeping creation going. And he adds that since the beginning of time, there's always been at least one tzaddik, one righteous person throughout all of world history that's kept Shabbos properly. What a powerful idea. When we try our best, when we keep the holiness of Shabbos alive, we're literally partnering with God in creating the world. It's in our merit that the world continues to exist in the coming week. I'll end with one last cool idea related to the Friday night Kiddush, and that is regarding wine. Kiddush is obviously more than just saying the text, the words of Kiddush. We have an obligation to read those words over a cup of wine. What's the significance of the cup of wine? Why do we need that? So the textual answer for this, once again, is a passage in the Talmud in Pesachim, which derives this from a verse in Exodus, which clearly learns that you need to use a cup of wine to make Kiddush. But on a deeper level, the commentaries explain that the reason for this is because wine inherently reflects this idea of connection between the spiritual and physical. How is that? In general, physical items break down over time. The car you drive, the house you live in, the clothing you're wearing, over enough time, they'll all decompose. But spirituality, on the other hand, is timeless. The spiritual world exists in a reality beyond time, totally unaffected by time. If we look in our physical world, what's the exception to physicality breaking down over time? What's the example of a physical item that actually improves over time? Exactly. I'm sure you got it by now. Wine. Wine improves with age. We therefore use wine at all spiritual moments. Whenever there's a tremendous spiritual infusion into a physical action, we make a blessing over a cup of wine. At a wedding, at a circumcision, at a Shabbos or holiday meal, all of these events are moments that reflect our partnership with God in elevating the physical world. So at all of these moments, we specifically take a cup of wine and make a blessing over it. This, I believe, is the deeper idea behind the Friday night Kiddush. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Thinking Jew podcast. If you did, I'd love it if you took a minute to leave a rating or review. Until next week, have an amazing week.
Thank you for listening to the Thinking Jew podcast and for taking the time to study Torah and deepen your connection to Judaism. If you found value in today's episode, please leave us a rating or review and subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or topic requests for Rabbi Moshe, please email thethinkingjewpodcast@gmail.com or visit thethinkingjew.com.